Coming up on The Reveal. It's a move meant to restrain violent offenders.
Go ahead and put your hands behind your back.
Why you gotta put that behind your back?
Listen, ma'am, it's our procedures and everything like
Okay,
that.
well, you take me now. Why you gotta do it?
Can you put it in front of me?
I can't.
It's gonna hurt my back.
Locked up and left to suffer, The Reveal investigates why are kids being cuffed by police. Then, the deadly virus strikes a second time.
Laying in the bed, I felt like I was suffocating to death. And I started to feel like my brain wasn't functioning properly. I couldn't talk, I couldn't text.
What happens when COVID comes back? The Reveal uncovers the risk of reinfection. And the cold cases and the carnival worker.
He sliced up my pants. That knife was sharp. It was like a razor. He had
A decades-old mystery gets new attention and fresh roadblocks. From our Midtown studios in Atlanta, The Reveal begins now with our multi-Emmy and National Mural Award-winning team of investigators.
Welcome to The Reveal. I'm Andy Perotti. A Georgia judge is condemning how the Atlanta Police Department handled the arrest of a 10-year-old boy. The criticism comes after The Reveal obtained video of the incident showing the child handcuffed for hours. Child advocates now want the city to change its policy of handcuffing children.
Black male, white t-shirt, red, and black shorts.
Two Atlanta police officers respond to a call in a South Atlanta neighborhood.
The LeVar went in the house and bought a gun out and pulled it out on him.
When they arrive, it's a 13-year-old boy accusing a 10-year-old of pointing a weapon at him following an argument during a neighborhood football game. One says it was a real pistol. The younger child claimed it was a BB gun. 11 Alive is not identifying the children.
Who had the gun?
It was a cat gun.
It was a cat gun? Where's the cat gun at?
Somewhere down there.
Where'd you throw it down there?
The elementary student never runs away, is not combative, or denies having a weapon. Instead, he walked the officers over 2 doors down to a wooded area barefoot, where he says he tossed it.
Oh, you threw it in here?
Instead of searching for a weapon, the officers walk away.
That's how grandma's a BB gun, I guess. I'm not going in the woods.
I'm not either.
20 minutes later, an officer asks the 10-year-old to put on his shoes
Is it right here?
and then handcuffs him behind his back.
Go ahead and put your hands behind your back. We're gonna put this jacket on. I'm not
Why
gonna
you gotta put that behind your back?
Listen, ma'am, it's our procedures and everything like that.
Okay, well, you
Listen,
take me
listen,
now. Why you
listen,
gotta do it in front of him?
We can't. The only people who can do it is if they're pregnant.
Can you put it in front of me?
I can't.
It's gonna hurt my back.
Johnny Harris is the child's mother.
So please don't put the handcuff. I asked her, I practically begged.
Her son is then walked out the front door and into the back of a patrol car, neighbors watching. This was the child's first interaction with law enforcement.
Why are we arresting him?
Meg Strickler is a criminal defense attorney not affiliated with the case.
Why did this escalate to, we're talking to one party, we talked to the other party, there was an issue, but without the gun, all it is a tiff. So you've marred his record forever without even looking for it. So if you're telling me it was a serious situation to make these charges, but yet you don't look for the gun, absolute wide hole of disconnect. I don't understand that.
The October 2019 arrest mirrors similar incidents captured on police body cameras and cell phones over the past few years throughout the country, including this 8-year-old boy in Key West a few months ago.
Put your hands behind your back.
And this little girl arrested in Orlando last year. She was 6 years old. In each case, the officers say they were following department procedures.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but maybe with kids you need to relook that procedure.
Stephen Teskey is the chief juvenile court judge in Clayton County, Georgia. He's a nationally known advocate for detention reform, testifying before Congress 4 times.
Research shows detention results in harsher treatment of a youth throughout their involvement with the system.
In 2003, Clayton County reformed its juvenile court system, which includes not handcuffing children unless it's an emergency. Since then, juvenile crime has dropped 80% in the county.
And if we already know the research that kids are twice as likely to drop out of school, to become more criminogenic when we handcuff them and detain them, then maybe we need to start asking ourselves, hey, systemically, should we take another look at these procedures and put a little bit more, criteria around when handcuffs should go on a kid who's not acting violently at the moment?
According to Atlanta City records, APD officers have arrested at least 267 children who are 12 years old or younger over the past 5 years, most for minor offenses like property crime. The department says it doesn't know how many of them were handcuffed. Rodney Bryant is Atlanta's interim police chief. Do you think this is a policy that Atlanta Police Department should have on the books?
I think that is one that we can take a look at and reevaluate. I want it to be clear that it's never our intention to traumatize a child. We know that a child seeing their parent being arrested could be traumatic. I think that you have to take everything in its totality. I know 10-year-olds that are stronger and taller than you and I, and that could be very concerning, especially when they become violent.
When the 10-year-old boy arrived at the Atlanta precinct, the officer handcuffed him to a bench for nearly 3 hours.
Kids do commit crimes, but when you take a child at a tender age and you put a handcuff on them, it rocks their world. It changes everything for them. Regardless how much one may think that that's a consequence that he should have thought of, kids don't think of it that way.
3 months after the story originally aired, the city said it did review its policy and it will continue to handcuff children. Judge Teskey's reform recommendations have been put in place in multiple jurisdictions in 41 states.
He survived COVID once.
Laying in the bed, I felt like I was suffocating to death. And I started to feel like my brain wasn't functioning properly. I couldn't talk, I couldn't text.
But now the reveal exposes what happens when the virus returns a second time and the risk of reinfection.
The rush to get the vaccine into the arms of millions grows as COVID mutates. But there's another reason the clock may be ticking. There is growing evidence that the antibodies created after fighting off the virus don't last forever, raising concerns about reinfection.
And laying in the bed, I felt like I was suffocating to death.
29-year-old Jordan Josie knows how it feels to fight COVID.
And I started to feel like my brain wasn't functioning properly. I couldn't talk, I couldn't text.
Even after being diagnosed with a collapsed lung, Josie says he was turned away twice from urgent care and once from the emergency room without a COVID test.
You're young, you don't have it, you're fine.
We had no idea back in March when Josie got sick. 18 to 29-year-olds would account for nearly a quarter of all COVID cases in Georgia. When Josie did eventually get a COVID test,
I was COVID positive.
Throughout the pandemic, the general belief has been get COVID, get antibodies, get protection from catching the virus again.
My name is Anish Mehta, MD.
But Dr. Mehta, the chief of infectious disease services at Emory University Hospital, says that's not always the case.
When we have patients that have recovered from COVID and have consistently negative tests and then another positive test, that is really where we get concerned of a potential reinfection.
Patients like Betty Kaysen. She tested positive in April, fighting the virus for more than 2 weeks in the hospital before returning to her long-term care facility. That's when we met her daughter, Maxine, leading a statewide effort to improve visitation at nursing homes.
They feel abandoned. They feel like they've been left to die alone. And the unfortunate part is they are dying alone.
Medical records show Kaysen tested negative at least 12 times over the next 3 months. But on September 9th, she ended up back in the hospital with COVID. This time, she didn't recover.
We are hearing of reports across the world and here in the United States, but they're still being investigated to confirm whether they're true infections.
According to the Department of Public Health, there are 0 cases of confirmed reinfection in Georgia. The bold letters put there by DPH. That's because to confirm a case, you need to be able to compare the genetic sequence of both the first and the second infection. That's nearly impossible when you consider most of those sample swabs sent to the labs are destroyed.
I was scared about going through what I went through for a second time.
In June, Josie tested positive again. Round 2 for him didn't last as long and wasn't as severe, but it was still bad.
I was having difficulty swallowing and talking, shortness of breath.
Josie says that shortness of breath lingers to this day.
I'm on an inhaler, like a steroid, that I think ordinarily like COPD patients use.
He can't confirm if he had COVID twice or never really got rid of the virus, making him what some have dubbed a long hauler. People who continue fighting the effects of the virus long after testing positive.
It is incumbent upon the clinicians to trigger that heightened suspicion of a second infection.
And until recently, no one was really looking. Doctors consistently say it's rare, but admit there is no plan in place to track it.
There's a degree of paranoia that I could become symptomatic again. So that's certainly a fear.
The immune system is complex, and antibodies aren't the only thing fighting off the virus. But when you consider that COVID has now been in our community for a year, and antibodies may only last a few months, the risk of reinfection, while rare, is real. UGA recently won a grant from the National Institutes of Health to begin studying reinfection.
It's a mystery that spans across state lines and decades of dead ends.
The guy is a serial killer. He's got a fantasy about sisters.
New revelations emerge of a notorious cold case full of twists and turns.
It's been more than 4 decades, but we're now learning how a carnival worker convicted of murdering 2 sisters may be connected to another unsolved case. AJ Legault from our sister station in Minneapolis investigates this twisted tale.
It's like you do it or you die. That was a choice.
Georgie Ann Dreher says it happened 46 years ago.
He had a scar in his left eyebrow.
The face of her attacker seared in her memory.
All he said was, my name is Lloyd.
Now, she's haunted by the belief that the very same Lloyd was involved in a mysterious Minnesota double murder. Missing posters went up just after Labor Day, 1974. The young Raker sisters missing, last seen walking to what was, back then, the Zayres Shopping Center in St. Cloud. Their bodies found almost a month later at a nearby quarry. They'd been stabbed repeatedly. Georgie Ann says she was also attacked at knife point just days before the Raker sisters disappeared.
He sliced up my pants. That knife was sharp. It was like a razor. He had...
As she tells her story, listen for the similarities.
And he was coming across the parking lot on a bike.
Georgie Ann says a guy in his late teens rode up to her near the same spot the Raker sisters were last seen.
And Zayres Shopping Center was right over there.
It was a hot summer day. Georgie Ann, new in town, was interested in making friends.
And I asked him, do you know any good swimming spots? He said, yes, the quarry. It's a beautiful place.
The quarry. The same place the sisters' bodies would be found. She says they biked off together, stopping along the way, here, down along the bank of the Sauk River. At first, sharing stories.
And I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a carnival worker. And he never said the last name. I knew him as Lloyd, the carnival worker.
But as they talked, his mood suddenly changed.
He reached back and he was fiddling around with his left hand and he pulled out a knife. And that's when I just started doing everything he said.
As he assaulted her, he talked about his fantasies. Her nightmare did not end until a car pulled up just above them. Enough of a distraction, she was able to escape. She even wrote about it at the time in her scrapbook.
You wrote his name right in your...
Yes, Lloyd.
Next to the words, then tried to kill me. Remember, it was just days before the Raker sisters disappeared.
So I want to make sure I have this straight. You met the man who assaulted you across the street from the Zayres. And
that's correct.
Where you were sexually assaulted was less than 3/4 of a mile from where the sisters' bodies were found.
That's correct.
She says she reported her attack to authorities. Lloyd was never located, and a Stearns County Sheriff's investigator told her they didn't think there was a connection to the Raker girls. Years later, still haunted, she set up an alert on her computer for Lloyd, the carnival worker. Eventually, she got a hit.
It came up from another state.
A link to this 2014 headline. Lloyd Welsh, a one-time carnival worker named a person of interest in another cold case involving young girls. The Lyon sisters, Catherine and Sheila, disappeared from the Wheaton Plaza shopping center outside Washington, D.C. in the spring of 1975, less than a year after the Raker sisters. Authorities released this mugshot to show what Welsh had looked like around that time.
It was mind-blowing.
When you saw this photo, did you have any doubt that this was the man who sexually assaulted you?
Absolutely not. That was the man that assaulted me.
Lloyd Welsh was already a convicted sex offender and a suspect in other crimes across the country. Georgianne reached out to the Maryland detectives investigating the case.
Detective Janney, Detective Leggett are in St. Cloud, Minnesota to interview Georgianne Dreyer.
This is a recording the East Coast detectives made when they came all the way to Minnesota to interview Georgianne about things her attacker had told her, including the name of a woman traveling with him.
He talks a lot about Helen. He really loved Helen.
But he called her Helen by name.
Yes.
Turns out Lloyd Welsh had been traveling the country with his girlfriend, Helen. That, and a host of other tiny details, convinced East Coast authorities Georgianne had been attacked by Lloyd Welsh. So convinced, they issued this subpoena to have her testify as a pattern witness when he went to trial for murdering the Lyon sisters. But her testimony wasn't necessary. In court, Lloyd Welsh pleaded guilty to participating in the Lyon sisters' murder. Even though Georgianne Dreyer was going to be a witness in that case, she says authorities in Stearns County still refused to consider Lloyd Welsh a serious suspect in the Raker sisters' murders.
That the guy's a serial killer. You got two girls and one on the East Coast, two girls out here, and he's got a fantasy about sisters.
In this email, dated August 2020, a Stearns County investigator writes, "The investigation of the Raker homicides points in a different direction than Mr. Welsh." Georgianne isn't giving up. She's written to Lloyd Welsh, even visited him once in prison, hoping for a confession that still hasn't come.
You want answers?
Yes, I want answers.
While they don't consider Lloyd Welsh a prime suspect, the sheriff says the Raker case is still open, and they continue to ask the public's help in solving this case.
Your favorite, step out of the vehicle for me.
These people really put my freedom in the hands of a coin flip.
Imagine getting arrested and having no idea the decision was made on the flip of a coin. Without our intervention, what would have happened when you went into court?
I would have had no idea, and I probably would have pled no contest. Nobody would have known about it.
That's what we do. We reveal what's hidden, and we got this defendant's case thrown out because otherwise she wouldn't have known. For more on these investigations or to submit a tip to the Reveal team, text REVEAL to 404-873-9114 or email us at thereveal@11alive.com.
Thank you for watching The Reveal, the only local weekly investigative show in the country. We'll see you right back here next week on The Reveal.